the shook bomb from here. My mama done send me the river to go back. As we the river go back, my about to come further. So they come, driver come break all those mirror. They come break one. So you come from there. We run come up for there. So they chook our madam. As we come back, and you don't know, you don't see say blood don dey rush for your body.
And like every normal traveler on a Nigerian road, she believed she would reach her destination. There was no sign that death was waiting ahead. No sign that a simple stop for drinks would become the last peaceful moment of her life. No sign that within minutes and a respected woman would be left bleeding inside a bullet-ridden vehicle fighting for her life before finally giving up in the hospital. This was not just an attack. This was a road ambush, a deadly trap, a terrifying broad daylight operation that shocked Nigeria and left an entire family in pain. Today, we take you deep into the final journey of Miss Funke Olakunrin, a woman who left home alive, stopped briefly for drinks and never returned. Miss Funke Olakunrin was known as a respected Nigerian woman from a powerful and widely respected family. She was not just an ordinary traveler, she was a mother, a daughter, a woman with a life, a name, a family, and people who expected to see her again. And most importantly, she was the daughter of elder statesman Pa Reuben Fashoranti, one of the most respected Yoruba leaders in Nigeria. That single fact alone made her death impossible to ignore, because when tragedy strikes a well-known family in a brutal way, the entire country pays attention. But this story is painful for another reason, because it reminds us of something terrifying. On a dangerous road, criminals do not care who you are. They do not care if you are known. They do not care if you are respected. Once they choose you as a target, all they see is prey. And that is exactly what makes this story so chilling, because that day on that road, a respected woman became a target in a deadly ambush. It was July 12, 2019, a normal day on the calendar, the kind of day that never looks dangerous when it begins. Miss Funke Olakunrin set out on a journey by road. Inside the vehicle were familiar faces, people she trusted, people who had no idea they were driving straight into a trap. She was not alone. She was in a vehicle with her driver and other occupants, including a female domestic aide or housemaid, often described in some retellings as part of her household support. At that moment, nothing may have seemed strange. The road may have looked normal. Cars moving, people traveling, business going on, life happening as usual, the kind of normal atmosphere that makes people lower their guard. But some of the most terrifying attacks in Nigeria do not begin with loud warnings. They begin quietly, a normal drive, a short stop, a peaceful stretch of road, and then suddenly the bush moves. Now this is where the story becomes deeply chilling, because according to the reconstructed account from those close to the incident, there was a stopover, a simple stop, a harmless stop, the kind of thing nobody remembers as important until tragedy happens. At some point during the journey, they had a stopover at Oreto. They stopped to buy some drinks, just drinks. Think about that for a moment. One ordinary pause, one small break on the road. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious. Just a quick stop to refresh, to buy drinks, to continue the journey. That was likely the last normal moment before terror took over. And this is what makes the story so emotional, because sometimes the final peaceful moment of your life is so ordinary. You do not even know it matters. You do not know it is your last quiet minute. You do not know the road ahead is already waiting to swallow you. After that stop, they continued the journey, and then they approached one of the most terrifying points in the story. That is Oreto Gate. That was where the road changed. That was where the air changed. That was where everything collapsed. As they got to the Oreto Gate area, it happened suddenly. Some masked men emerged from the bush, not from a checkpoint, not from a parked vehicle, not from a normal roadside scene, from the bush, like men who had been waiting, like men who knew the terrain. like men who had hidden themselves until the perfect moment. This was not random. This was not confusion. This looks planned, calculated, timed, the kind of attack that gives innocent travelers only seconds to react. Inside the vehicle, fear must have exploded instantly. One moment they were moving on a public road, the next moment armed masked men were coming out of the bush. That image alone is terrifying because it means the road was no longer a road. It had become a trap. And at that moment, according to the account, Madam saw the danger and immediately told the driver to reverse. That one detail is powerful because it shows she understood the threat almost immediately. She knew these were not harmless men. She knew this was serious. She knew they had to get out fast. So she told the driver to reverse now, and the driver obeyed. He tried. He actually reversed, but sadly, evil had already moved faster than escape. The moment the driver tried to reverse, the gunmen opened fire. No warning, no mercy, no hesitation. They started shooting at their vehicle, and not only their vehicle, they were also shooting at other vehicles on the road. That detail is very important because it tells us this was bigger than a personal attack. This was a full ambush operation, a broad daylight road assault, a violent criminal attack on multiple travelers, a scene of terror, a situation where the road suddenly turned into a war zone. The bullet came hard, fast, loud, violent, and once the shooting began, panic took over everything. Inside the vehicle, fear would have been immediate. Pure survival. No time to think, no time to plan, no time to understand how many men were outside. Only the defending sound of gunfire. Some of the bullets hit the vehicle, and then something even more terrifying happened. According to the account, the gunmen were not just firing randomly, they shot at the tires. That means they were trying to disable the car, trying to stop it, trying to make sure the victims could not escape. That is the behavior of men who know exactly what they are doing. Not confused attackers, not random roadside thugs, but men carrying out a deliberate highway ambush. That is why this case later looked more and more like the work of an organized kidnapping gang, because they did not just shoot, they targeted movement, they targeted escape, they wanted that vehicle trapped, and the driver struggled to escape. The attackers sprayed the car with bullets. That is the exact phrase that captures the horror. They sprayed the car, meaning the gunfire was not just one or two shots. It was heavy, aggressive, sustained, the kind of gunfire that turns every second into possible death. Imagine the sound inside that vehicle: glass breaking, people screaming, metal shaking, bullets tearing through the body of the car, tires under attack, windows exploding, bodies ducking, ends trembling, no one knowing which bullet would hit next. This was no longer just an attempted robbery. This was a massacre waiting to happen, and in that terrifying moment, the driver was doing everything he could to maneuver, trying to save himself, trying to save the passengers, trying to reverse out, trying to escape the kill zone. But then the car lost control, and according to the account, the vehicle hit the culvert. That one moment changed everything, because once the car hit the culvert, its movement was broken, its balance was gone, its escape became even harder, and the attackers had exactly what they wanted: a trapped vehicle, a disabled target, a frightened group of passengers boxed into chaos. That is one of the most terrifying details in this whole story, because it means the victims were not just attacked, they were cornered. And then came the moment that turned fear into irreversible tragedy. In the middle of that heavy gunfire, in the middle of the screaming, in the middle of the car struggling after hitting the culvert, the bullet hit her. Miss Funke Olakunrin was struck. That was the moment the story changed forever, because until then, there was still hope. hope that they might escape, hope that the car might get away, hope that everyone might survive. But once she was hit, the road became a death scene, and this is where the story becomes deeply emotional, because in situations like this, people do not always die immediately. Sometimes they remain conscious, sometimes they struggle to breathe, and sometimes they look around in shock, not fully believing what just happened. Imagine her in that moment. A woman who only moments earlier had asked the driver to reverse and escape. A woman who was trying to survive, now wounded, bleeding inside a car that had been sprayed with bullets. That is horrifying. That is painful. That is the kind of scene that stays in the mind long after the story ends. And for everyone in that vehicle, that moment would never be forgotten. Now, here is one of the most dramatic and frightening details of the attack. As the shooting continued, the driver did not remain trapped in the normal way people imagine. According to reports, the driver escaped through the windscreen. Think about how desperate that sounds. Not opening the door calmly, not stepping out normally, but escaping through the windscreen. That tells you just how chaotic and terrifying this scene had become. It means the car was under such heavy assault that normal escape route may have become impossible. Doors may have been unsafe. The attackers may have been too close. Bullets may have been flying too heavily. The body acts on instinct in moments like that. Break out, jump out, run, survive, and that is what he did. According to reports, the housemate also escaped, and some other occupants of the car escaped as well. This tells us the attack created total panic and total disorder. People were trying to save themselves in any way possible. Some escaping through openings, some jumping out, some running for their lives, some likely not even knowing where they were running to. Only one thought in the mind: get out before the next bullet finds you. But in that chaos, Miss Funke had already been hit, and that made her the most vulnerable person in that vehicle. And in Nigeria, during highway attacks, one of the deadliest problems is not the bullet. It is what happens after. How quickly can help come? How quickly can someone be moved? How quickly can they get to a hospital? How much blood has already been lost? And how much internal damage has already happened? That is why road ambushes are so cruel. Sometimes the victim survives the first seconds but loses the longer battle afterward. And that appears to be the heartbreaking part this story took. After the chaos, gunfire, and the terror on that road, they did what every human being would do. They rushed her to the hospital. That moment always carries desperate hope, because once someone is being rushed to a hospital, people still believe there is a chance. People trying to explain what happened, people trying to hold her, people trying to keep her awake, people praying inside their hearts, people refusing to believe this could be the end. But sadly, it was. According to the account, she later gave up the ghost in the hospital. That line is painful because it means she did not die instantly on the road. She fought, she held on, she was moved. There was still a battle to save her, but in the end, the injury was too severe. The attack had done too much damage, and the woman who entered that car alive was gone. The moment the public learned who the victim was, the story exploded. This was not just a crime report anymore. This was national news. A respected woman, daughter of Pa Ruben Fasoranti, killed after a terrifying highway ambush. Broad daylight. That combination alone was enough to shock the entire country. And then the headlines began to spread fast. Very fast. Many blogs, many early online reports, many social media posts, and one label kept appearing again and again: herdsmen. At the time, many people immediately believed that version. The country was already tense. There had already been so many conversations about attacks linked to armed men in forests and highways. So once this happened, many platforms quickly pushed the herdsmen killed her angle. And to be honest, that early narrative became very powerful. It fueled anger, it fueled fear, it fueled ethnic tension. It made the story even more explosive. But as we know in many major Nigerian crime cases, the first public version is not always the final truth. This is where the case becomes even more important. Yes, many early blogs said herdsmen. Yes, that was the popular public language at the time. But after my deep research, the attack began to look less like a simple herdsman headline and more like something more structured, more calculated, more criminal, and more organized. The behavior of the attackers told its own story. As far as I'm concerned, this is not the behavior of random men passing through. That is the behavior of a coordinated highway ambush gang, a criminal team, the kind often linked to kidnapping and armed robbery operations on Nigeria highways. And that is the most accurate way to frame this story today, not as just a rushed emotional label, but as a terrifying case of an organized kidnapping gang-style road ambush. And in many ways, that is even scarier. This case hits Nigeria hard for many reasons. First, because of who she was. Second, because of how brutal the attack was. Third, because it happened in broad daylight. Fourth, because the details were the kind that terrify every traveler. A stop for drinks, a toll gate, masked men from the bush, a sudden order to reverse, bullets flying, tires short, a car crashing into a covert, a driver escaping through the windscreen, passengers fleeing for their lives, a woman bleeding inside a damaged vehicle, a desperate rush to the hospital, and then death. That is not just news, that is nightmare material. That is the kind of story that makes families afraid every time a loved one says, "I am traveling by road." That is why this case stayed in people's mind, because it was not just tragic, it was terrifyingly relatable. The police later said the attack was linked to a ruthless organized kidnapping and armed robbery gang operating along that dangerous highway corridor. After months of investigation, tracking, and intelligence gathering, the police finally arrested 4 suspects in connection with the murder of Miss Funke Olakunrin. The suspects were identified as Muhammad Usman, Mazaje Lawan, Adamu, Hawa Abubakar. The men were later arraigned in court over the brutal attack. According to the prosecution, they were not just accused of murder alone. They were also linked to serious crimes including kidnapping, armed robbery, conspiracy, and other violent offenses connected to the deadly highway operation. The case moved to the Ondo State High Court in Akure, where the trial continued. Then came the judgment. On June 10, 2022, the court delivered its decision. Justice William Olamide found 3 of the 4 defendants guilty. The 3 men convicted were Muhammad Usman, Mazaje Lawan, Adamu. The court sentenced all 3 men to death by hanging for their role in the killing of Miss Funke Olakunrin, as well as related charges tied to the violent attack. While the 4th suspect, Hawa Abubakar, was discharged and acquitted.
Bàtà ń lọ bá ṣe drive kúrò l'Ákúrẹ́ bí adé ọ̀rẹ́ ilé epo Sókàyà park ara àwọn drinks coke tá a máa mú.
We had a stopover to buy soft drinks at Ore. We were attacked at Ore toll gate by some masked men who emerged from the bush. At this point, Madame asked me to reverse, which I did. They started shooting at us and other vehicles. In the process, my boss was hit by bullets. Some of us in the vehicle escaped. We later rushed her to the hospital where she gave up the ghost.
Wọ́n ti gbé mami lọ hospital, àwọn ọlọ́pàá ti gbé wọn lọ. Ìgbà tí mo wá dé hospital, àwa ní mami ó ti kú.
As you dey go, you don pass over, no dey, then they come rock up for there. So from there, they shook my madam.
How it take happen?
As they took the bomb, so we don't enter inside the bush.
But when they got to a particular place, they said some guys came out from the bush and were shooting. So they tried to escape and they shot at the tires of the car, they sprayed the car. So while the driver was trying to maneuver, the car hit the culvert and the car somersaulted. So the bullets hit her and the driver escaped through the windscreen, and the housemaid too, and some other people, some other occupants of the car.